Speech Sister Show. This is a show where we talk about ways that we could be culture responsive in our communities, for our colleagues, and in our day to day lives. I am so thankful to have Nakia Smith on here for today's episode. She is a part of the deaf and hard of hearing community, and she is an influencer who's brought a lot of light of Black ASL to the online space and beyond. So it's Black History Month. So it's only right that we had Nakia on here today to shine light on this. And Nakia, I have students now. I'm in Oklahoma in Tulsa. And right now we are actually learning about different communities and ways to be culturally responsive. And it's right on time that we're learning about the deaf and hard of hearing community. There's actually a small unit on Black ASL. And I just think it would just be lovely to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and do your introduction. Please let me know if there's anything else that you would like to share. Sweet. So, Nakia is an influencer and an activist. She put Black ASL on the map in late 2020. Her work with Netflix and Gap has gained a lot of attention to the audience who have no knowledge about Black American Sign Language. Nakia is joined by our ASL interpreter, Rory, and she is from Pro Bono. And I'm so happy they're based in California. So if you are just happen to be here and are looking for an interpreter, I definitely recommend Pro Bono ASL. Thank you for being here, Rory. Awesome. So, Nakia, is there anything that you would like to add to your bio?
I think you've gotten pretty much everything. Anything else that I need to add, I can add later on.
Sure. Well, one question I like to ask everyone is what is your why?
So, my why is really based on me being a social media influencer. It's all about education. I do like to create content that influences others so that they can see that there is a different perspective, that there is a deaf community. I love sharing content that is similar to my background. You know, everyone is not the same. We're not a monolith. However, we have so many things in common as well. I do like to really advocate, and I like to give reasons why we need to really learn about the deaf, especially the Black deaf community. We have faced oppression and ableism and discrimination. It's so important to listen to the stories that we have as a result. And on top of that, I do want to make folks out on the internet aware of who we are.
Well, you've been doing an excellent job at that, I have to say. Can you actually walk us through your journey to becoming an influencer? I know that you mentioned Netflix and Gap, and just tell us a little bit about that journey there.
Yeah, sure. Well, COVID during that time, what, 2020, 2019 even, things really were in upheaval. And so all of us being isolated at home, nothing to do, I felt the same way. So I set up a TikTok. I had one, but I thought TikTok was just for the hearing community. I didn't see any captions being used, so I felt isolated from it. I did not feel a part of that community. But I noticed more and more people were joining. So I thought, okay, well, let me join. We're all human, right? So that's what I have in common with these folks. So I got on TikTok and I noticed that there was not accessibility for deaf folks. There was nothing that made us feel that we belonged, that we fit. There was just a bunch of hearing people there. And then I saw that was an option to add text onto what you posted. So I thought, okay, well, I can do that and I can teach ASL. I can take advantage of this opportunity. There's no rules here for TikTok. Let me go ahead and do that. So I began teaching basic sign language, like, different foods, greetings, things like that, doctor's office terminology. And then I would say after a couple of weeks of doing that, I received a lot of criticism for my teaching. And so I was very confused, wondering why people were critiquing me, why there was such a backlash. And I noticed that my grandfather, what he ended up mentioning to me was that he ends up signing some old signs a lot of times. And so we didn't realize that what I was signing was not necessarily used by other people. Other people use different signs. I'm using the signs that my deaf grandfather has been using. And so I realized, oh, okay, this is Black ASL. This is what the difference is. And so I began to bring my grandpa alongside of me and say, oh, see, this is where I learned this sign that you're critiquing is wrong. This is where it comes from. And this is my Black deaf grandfather who's, older and who's been using it all his life. People were very shocked to see that there were differences in some sign vocabulary. And so I just wanted to send out the message to respect our language, respect the changes in our language. I began posting on Twitter, and Netflix reached out to me and said, we want to share your story on our platform. I was very shocked. I thought it was a scam at first. I'm like, nah, this can't be real. But then I got an email and I looked down at the bottom at the signature and it had, like the Netflix, and you could click on it and it would go right to the website. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. This is real. So that was the first step. After they contacted me, they reached out with their team. We made connections. They have very strict rules. And especially during that time of COVID, there were certain things we could not do. So they did come to Dallas. They filmed me and it didn't feel real. It felt surreal. It felt like a dream. And, I'm like, hey, this is Black ASL. This is our language. This is who we are. And then from there, I couldn't really say anything because I couldn't tell people what I was working on in particular. And so that got released. And finally, it went out to the community and people were able to see what I was working on. I got so much support. Specifically from Reese Witherspoon. There's a couple of other, oh yes, Ava DuVernay reached out. There were a lot of people who reached out and supported me. And that just made me feel so thrilled, so alive. And it had me feel so seen, just where everyone was able to take witness of what it was that I had been doing. And so people were reaching out, hey, can I collaborate with you? And the Gap, the workout gear, clothes, Gymshark, excuse me. Gymshark is the name of the workout gear brand, a big company that does wardrobe for working out. Can we partner with you for that? And so from there, it became a little bit overwhelming because I didn't know at that time what I was doing. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know about, commodifying what I was doing at that time. I was just kind of working on myself and working and helping my mom with some things. And so it was very overwhelming, but that was the beginning of my journey. And I am still here to this day.
Well, thank God that you've been uplifted, not only by your own community, but also amazing figureheads like Ava DuVernay. Wow. Wow. So congratulations for all of the hard work that you're doing. I'm very happy that that's getting noticed.
Yeah, I am too.
So I do actually want to know, what feedback have you gotten from the ASL community, specifically the Black ASL community?
I get a lot of feedback, and most of the time it is critiquing. Some questions are being asked of me. Did you go to a deaf school? Did you do this? Did you do that? And I have to respond, no, I'm from a deaf family. I ended up going to a mainstream school where there were hearing and deaf students mixed in together. I did not go to a residential school. I went, very briefly, I think maybe kindergarten through third grade, where it's only deaf students in the school, but I've been mainstream for the rest of my life. We use ASL, we sign. So you're asking me about social media? Or are you asking about prior to my social media presence, about the Black deaf community?
More so your social media presence after this, so after you became an influencer.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
So after me becoming an influencer, I would get a lot of people asking me, so can you use this sign? Can I use this sign? People who weren't necessarily Black. So people were asking, where can I learn Black ASL from? Is this just something that you made up? Is this something that's legit? There was a lot of confusion because people thought, well, I'm Black, so I must be using Black ASL. And I had to explain that that's not what Black ASL is. Black ASL derived from years and years ago, where Black students were going to different schools than white students, and how it developed into a different language and how it's passed down the generations. And it's not just something you acquire in a silo.
And no one got offended or anything? Were they really receptive to just that education?
Yeah, it's split. Some people, disagree, and some people are respectful and accept that that's what it is. Sometimes people, once you explain, they want to know a good reason why. And, I'm never trying to oppress anyone. I'm never trying to condescend. I just want everyone to understand where the language originates from and respect that, and if you're learning and you would like to continue to learn about it without making fun of it, that's great. But when you're making fun of it, that's disrespectful. So as long as I respect you and you respect me and where we come from, then we can move forward.
Well, could you tell us a bit about the history? I know that you started touching on it, but really just the history of Black ASL and how it shows up now in modern times.
You used as in today, currently, and
Yeah.
the origin. Got it. So Black ASL originated a long time ago. And my theory, my perspective, my feeling regarding Black ASL is that it started at the home with Black deaf families using whatever signs they were using at home, because Black deaf people did not have access to formal standard ASL taught in schools via school books. There was segregation, there was Jim Crow, especially in the South. And so Black deaf kids, would go home to hearing parents after school, and they would do what are called home signs. They would just create signs that are just recognizable within their family. This represents, mom. This is, what represents a book. This is something that originated again in the South. And so that's how they were able to function. And even to this very day, like my parents, they do know ASL, but we still preserve the Black ASL, the signs that were used more back in the day. ASL is more standardized. It's something that's used across America, but there are some people who still use Black ASL that they learned a long time ago.
Okay, and thank you for telling us that. So, becoming an activist, why would you say that BASL activism is important to you?
Wow, because I am Black. And I feel like it is very important who I am and how I come into the world. So I am deaf as well. I am a woman. And I feel that as someone in the Black deaf community, we're very small. We're a very small community. And so it just makes me feel like we need to be very much staunch advocates for Black ASL as Black deaf folks in the deaf community. We've been oppressed. We don't have that equality that we all strive for. We don't have that. We don't have the same privileges as some folks in our community. We see stories, we see struggles, we see, situations that you are unable to climb out of. And so I have to use my platform to spotlight that. Why not? Why not talk about this? Why not be an advocate? Why not speak out against things that are wrong and support things that are right? So I've become an activist, and I think it started with George Floyd. After the murder of George Floyd, that really hit home. I felt very heavy, very, you know, I felt upset. I was infuriated as a Black woman. I was so angry. And so I felt like at that time, that was when my activism really started.
Yeah, with the George Floyd murder, that who I think about is David Player. I don't know if you got to watch that episode, but he's also a member of the Black ASL community.
Yes.
Yes, and he talked about how he started writing his blog about that and got backlash from white members of the deaf and hard of hearing community. So that was very surprising to me.
Was that a question you were asking me, or was that a
Nope,
statement?
that was just a statement. That was just a comment.
All right. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
question. But yes, I understand. I agree. I agree with the shock of that.
Well, I do know, I do love how you mentioned your intersections. You mentioned that you are Black, you're a woman, and you're also a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community. How would you describe how those intersections, what's the word I'm looking for, just really impact how you relate to the society that we're in?
So as a Black deaf woman, you know, we are the most disrespected people in the world, you know, Black women in general. And so Malcolm X said that, and it's been true ever since. And so that's who I am. That's my calling card. You know, I am Black, I am deaf as equally as I am Black. And, you know, the oppression that comes along with that, being deaf, and the ableism that happens, and feeling like, where do I put that? Being a Black person and dealing with, you know, the Black hearing community, oftentimes we are oppressed from them. So it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to juggle and to deal with. And so I have to really work hard, you know, and make sure that people understand me. Black hearing folks understand me as a deaf person. Other deaf people understand me as a Black person. And to put all those into one person is who I am. It's a lot to deal with.
If you don't mind me asking, where did you grow up? Where was your schooling done?
So I went to school in Dallas, Texas. I was mainstream, like I said, with hearing kids most of my life. That's where I grew up, and that's where I am.
So, how would you describe your experiences as a Black woman who is also deaf and hard of hearing going through this education system?
The education system. Wow. It wasn't tough, but when I started high school, it became definitely more difficult, realizing that I was getting older, and all that entailed. The education system, it was more of racist experiences that I had there, seeing racism in high school. You know, in elementary school, you overlook those things, you don't recognize what's happening. But when you get to high school, it's a different world. You get to see in everyday life other folks and the privileges they have. Even dealing with things like interpreters. And I can explain a little bit more about that with the interpreter situation. So in high school, I had a hard time with some of the interpreters. Most of them were not Black. And so there was a disconnect between myself and the interpreters. One of my interpreters I grew up with, she was someone who our family knew, kind of a family friend, so to speak. And she used Black ASL as well. And so she showed up in my classroom one day, and I felt, okay, wow, this is someone, you know, I can kind of relax. And at that time, I was a senior in high school, and this was the first time, you know, that I had that. And I was an straight A student, you know, I didn't have B's and C's, you know. I felt finally I was able to deal with this interpreter, and we were able to get along. Ran track, I did sports, after school activities. Finally, someone who understood me. And so that just made my life so much easier. And just to be able to be myself, like, hey, girl, what's good? You know, class today, da 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 da. And so that really helped my experience to become one that was positive. And so it was like, you know, one day I went out in the world and I found an interpreter who matched who I was and who matched my linguistic needs. And that was great.
That is amazing. So, if there are any members of the deaf and hard of hearing community right now watching this, what is one thing that you would want to tell them as far as just even getting access to an interpreter who matches their style?
It's pretty simple. By doing some research, recognizing what your preferences are in an interpreter, feeling that you don't have to code switch to speak a certain way, sign a certain way. They might be someone who fits you, who is Black like you are. They might have a certain tone of voice that you feel matches you. You don't feel like you have to be someone different in order to work with an interpreter. That's someone who is a good fit for you.
Mm, thank you. Now, as an influencer, I'm sure that you get a lot of people coming up to you and asking you questions. People from specifically the deaf and hard of hearing community asking you questions. What are some common questions or advice that people ask you for, and how do you respond?
Well, first thing people will ask, "Hey, do you mind getting a selfie with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, that's fine." So I get a lot of selfie requests. Typically, people will ask me, "Do you mind showing me?" And this might be shocking, but can you show me some of the bad words? How would you sign that in BASL? Which is a turnoff a little bit. I have to
Sure.
let you know. But that's it. Just is what it is. It's weird to me that that's the first thing you want. The second question people tend to ask me is how, if I were to go on with my life without social media, sometimes I feel like I don't want social media anymore. People are like, no, you need to stay on. We need you here to advocate. And so I'm kind of riding the rails right now. I'm not sure. It's a lot going on, but social media can be overwhelming. And so sometimes I feel like I want to leave. So they're like, no, you know, please don't do it, but do you ever feel like you want to? And so I, kind of let them know that now that I've taken on this helm of teaching through social media, that it's my desire to continue to do so.
Being an activist is a big role, especially if you're doing it through a platform like Instagram and TikTok, because you're managing TikTok and Instagram. Are there any other platforms that you're managing?
Well, I'm mostly on Instagram, even though TikTok, I do have more followers there. I have over like 400,000 followers on TikTok, but TikTok was more just like, it's easier to just click and follow people and you don't really pay attention to them. And so I feel like I took off there, but Instagram is what I prefer to use for my platform.
Okay. How come? Are there any differences with the audience that you get?
Yeah, for sure. There's different audiences, different connections that I've been able to make on one versus the other.
Mm.
Uh, Accessibility is still not the best. I'm not satisfied with it on TikTok, where I can really get in with my followers. Instagram is a little bit more balanced. It's a little bit more, accessible. So that's why I prefer to use Instagram.
Mm. And I'm trying to gather my thoughts because that actually did bring me to another question. I do want to get back to the healthcare providers and speech pathologists watching this. What advice could you give to us when it comes to interacting with Black ASL students and adults?
Hmm. So, folks who work with Black deaf students, you want me to
Yes.
give some advice, correct?
Yes, yes. And also those because not all, I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, so not all speech pathologists work with kids. We also work with adults. So, just for example, picturing if one of us were to work with your grandparents, for example, how would you want for us to be more culturally responsive in that way?
So, I think it's really important that everyone is able to just be who they are, identify as you want to identify, be comfortable with someone who accepts that. I think that's a message in general. If you're working with interpreters, you want deaf people to feel comfortable with who they're working with. Any social space, it's important to have that level of comfort. I think that's a really tough question that you just threw at me, though.
Okay, and I'm sorry. One question that's coming up, even with you saying that, is how we would vet that. And I'll give you just an example of teachings with cultural responsiveness in general with the field. The first thing is just like what you said is, I think this is where you were going with it, just owning who you are. So as us being the service providers, owning our own identities and showing up as ourselves, like you said. um, But even just any other levels of cultural responsiveness, I know, for example, as Black women, we don't like when people come up to us and asking to touch our hair, or any question, any microaggressions about that. And so a way that I could reframe this is any microaggressions that we could look out for, because really, we could be very ableist. We really can, without even realizing it. And we really want to do no harm.
Got it. Got it. So who you are, what your identity is important. But what I've experienced in terms of the hearing community is that I want you to understand that we are the same, not that, oh, you poor little deaf person, go sit over there, the infantilizing of us. I don't want like that. That's not who we are. I'm a Black deaf woman just like you. Um, I had a Texas State University and HBCU. My sister graduated from there, so I have visited there often with her on campus. And in my experience socializing with some Black hearing community folks, is just seeing that most of them felt like, oh, there are Black deaf people? Like, yeah, we're here. So just because I'm deaf, that should not make you feel like, oh, well, we don't know what to do with you, so go somewhere else. When it comes to police officers just see us as all, you're all Black. It's not that, oh, this is a Black deaf person. You're just a Black person. When people see you, you're just Black. You're not deaf. And so that's important to make sure that as a community, we recognize that we're all in this together.
Thank you so much for also adding the piece about police officers and police brutality, because I do feel that that is incredibly important. Um, are there any changes that you would like to see in social advocacy?
Oh, so many changes. So many. And like in the deaf community, we are still fighting. We are still reaching out. We're saying the same things over and over. And so there needs to be a lot of change for us to finally be like, okay, wow, we've reached that point. But when? When is that going to happen? There are so many changes that we want in terms of including the deaf community, and we're one world. We should be able to be positive and be around each other without being separate, this faction over here, this group over there. We should be able to be together because we should all have that one goal.
What are some, because I know that you did say that you all are saying the same thing. Is there anything else that the hearing community might not be aware of?
Yeah, that we are deaf people, but we are still out there. We still like to have fun. We like to socialize. We like to have conversations. We are friendly, but at the same time, we are going to be hella blunt when we speak. And so that's one thing that's important for hearing folks to know about deaf people. That's just who we are. We're just kind of born blunt. And so they have to recognize that.
Thank you so much, Nakia, for just coming on here today and opening up about your influencing journey and advocacy and more things that we should know. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we close out tonight?
Hmm. I think just to continue to listen to our stories. Deaf folks have so much to share. Our fight continues, and it's important for hearing folks to listen. We will not stop yelling. We are going to keep on until you listen.
Thank you so, so much, Nakia, for coming on the show. And thank you, Rory, for being so fabulous and just being the voice for Nakia. So, and thank you, everyone, for joining us live and joining us on the replay. Nakia, where can people find you if they want to know more?
So you can find me on Instagram. It's ITS Charmay, CHARMAY, and the same name for TikTok. It's Charmay. That's where you'll find me.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Pediatric Speech Sisters show. We will see you next time. Bye, fam.